Why did English become the international language? That is the question that we're going to answer today. English is the de facto global lingua franca. It's the language of global commerce, it's the main language of international diplomacy, it's the language of air traffic control, and it's the language of the majority of academic journals. And maybe most importantly for us, it's the most common language on the internet. And it's also the language that international travelers with different native languages use to communicate with each other. The very definition of a lingua franca. But how did English reach this kind of status? Well, it's partly because of the role of the United States of America as a global superpower, but the stage was set earlier than that. In the 16th century, England started to establish overseas colonies, and by the end of the 18th century, the British Empire had grown quite extensive, with colonies in a few parts of India and Africa, in the Caribbean, Canada, and what was to become the United States. The British were not the only ones establishing colonies, of course. Much of present-day Canada and the US was part of New France, a large area that had been colonized by the French. But these areas were lost to the British during the 7 Years' War. And much of what is now the southern and western United States was colonized by the Spanish. But these areas were taken by the United States in wars with Spain and later Mexico. The Dutch had also colonized an area known as New Netherland, but it was lost to the British in the late 17th century. There were also non-British immigrants to the British colonies of North America, for example, German-speaking immigrants. For a long part of the USA's history, German was its second most widely spoken language. It declined in use during the First World War because of the stigma of being associated with Germany. So while there were numerous languages spoken by settlers, English became the dominant language of the United States. The British kept on establishing colonies after American independence, including much larger areas of the Indian subcontinent and Africa, Australia and New Zealand, and after the First World War, in the Middle East. In 1922, the British Empire covered almost a quarter of the Earth and about 1/5 of the world's population. Some of these countries became populated by English settlers, and these are the countries where English became the dominant language, replacing many others. Other countries were not populated by permanent settlers, only by administrative, military, and commercial personnel. Generally, in these countries, English did not become the single dominant language, but became a prestige language, and a convenient lingua franca that could facilitate communication among the linguistically diverse populations. English was not the only colonial language gaining a foothold throughout much of the world, but along with French and Spanish, it was one of the main ones, and it's hard to imagine a language other than one of these becoming the global lingua franca. Through the 19th century, it was French, but English began to surpass French in the 20th century.